Karl Marx talked about a political economy was the term. And what he understood was that economics forms dominated political forms. And that when the right to eat, the right to live, the ability to accomplish the hierarchy of needs required, shelter, food, water. I think now we think Wi-Fi is in there, but technically it's not. Is that when those forms became unstable, that you would leave democracy or you would leave politics off the table to go make sure that you met those necessary needs that you need. So you can only think of politics as a political economy, that when somebody now has the needs, has achieved sustenance, can now, fill their needs with great wealth, it now makes them easier to leverage political means for their own will. For instance, if they have money, they also have the means of subsistence in our world. Probably shouldn't, that's probably not how it should be, but that's how it is. The subsistence, and we can also lobby people to vote with that money. The Koch brothers do it. Oh, the Koch brothers. Soros does it too. Goldman Sachs, the insurance companies. Why is it that almost every presidential candidate, maybe albeit Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, are almost always vetted by the insurance companies and Wall Street? I would also say by the military-industrial complex, but you usually don't see that publicly. And I think that's such a great way to think of politics that we never talk about. We always talk about how, voting, I think, is seen as this private, kind of almost religious task that, if you choose to get involved in, it can impact your whole life. It can change everything. Well, if economic forms dominate political forms, then you're going to have a huge problem. And I think that's why you need to have any economic system. You need to set it up so at its basis level, you give people the need from want, the need from undernourishment. You give them their basic needs so that then they could either chase after what they truly want in life, and they wouldn't be scared to fail. That's just personally, but also then other powers, they could also have a political life. In Athens, Sheldon Woolen writes that people were paid if they were politically active in Athens. And I think that's what we need in our society is how are we going to alleviate the pain of the masses if the masses can't even vote or participate politically when that's supposed to be their only means of communicating with the broader mass of people for of progressing their needs in society, their common issues. If they don't have the money because they're the proletariat, as Karl Marx would have called them, and they don't even have the time to vote. We don't even vote on a work day. And it makes you just think of what Peter Joseph calls structural violence, where there's all this violence going in that's by the system. It's not a guy robbing you or a guy holding or, a school shooting at the gun. It's just simply the fact that maybe, for instance, you don't get enough sleep because you work 2 jobs because the minimum wage isn't high enough. And because the minimum wage isn't high enough, you now no longer get enough sleep. You're unhealthy. Maybe you get obese because you have to eat terribly to stay awake with all those caffeine drinks. And then maybe now you accidentally, fall, trip, break your leg, and now you have to pay an overinflated healthcare bill because there isn't good healthcare system because Barack Obama was paid off by the private insurance industry to make sure we don't have a functioning healthcare system like every other first world nation. I think at least the other, like the top 30, maybe the top 40. And I don't ever think we have this universal approach to the system because I think we think, oh, there's economics where you can be Bill Gates and you can make it rich and you can be, either a millionaire, a billionaire, a thousandaire, or just be a family man, however you choose to participate in this individualistic economic sphere called capitalism. But then how do we go into participating into a group mentality that is a democracy? The demos, the people communicating their need. And, it's like when you see on Survivor and he puts out the torch. If you've ever watched Survivor, and that's a very individualistic show, he always says the trademark line, the tribe has spoken. Well, Can we say for the last, since I don't know, I've been born, since Cheney '92, that truly every presidential election that the public has spoken when, I don't think more than 70%, or if it was 70%, definitely not over 75% of the people have voted. That if just that whole majority had voted, the entire result would have probably changed. Heck, you could have maybe had a whole other candidate win the election if that whole electorate decided to go for another person. So making a society that understands that term, political economy, I think is what I'm going to look into more. And something I think puzzles me about Karl Marx more today is that he understood that, voting is not the ends of politics, and, making money is not the end of economy, especially when in a society they're intertwined. When you can use economics to buy politics, and when, politicians want in on the economy, they want in on the money, that creates this strange choices where they, politicians put their decisions around being lobbyists, and economists or capitalists put their decisions around what they can get, what public services they can get from the politicians. And so they do have incentives to work together and basically suppress or oppress the masses, and making sure that, hey, if we both scratch each other's back, we create this cyclical relationship where we help each other out and no one else can truly compete. Noam Chomsky writes about free market thing. The masters of mankind, as Adam Smith called them, the masters of mankind were worried that they could not compete in a truly free market. And that's what Noam Chomsky believes is true. In a truly free market where you have to compete, that was not true. That's why almost all billionaires really take advantage of state capital most of the time. The example I use as a programmer to think of is DARPA. So the internet, the actual really hard years, the 20 years of the internet that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs got to privatize in the 70s, or basically make their own private companies, is DARPA and the NASA moon mission. So that's when the public coffer paid for all the failures and successes of the modern day computer system. DARPA, I forgot exactly what it understood for, what it stood for, but what it was attempted to do was, after 52, when we created the first hydrogen bomb, with Eisenhower, we wanted a system to communicate in case of nuclear winter. And so that's what DARPA was. It was the first connection to contact each other via computer. It didn't become the internet until whatever, Bill Joy or whatever it is, Al Gore in the 90s or 80s, whenever you want to consider the first internet. I would say probably early 80s was the real internet. And, or the creation of the HTML standard, is that all that hard work, all that investment the public put in, you never saw your paycheck. You never saw, public free Wi-Fi for everyone, which I think we at least deserve for all the money at least my parents put in, or your grandparents put in, to the public coffers in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and also all the oil subsidies we pay to the private ExxonMobil companies to go drill, which is all just profit to the most profitable company on earth, ExxonMobil. You can check this out, but in most cities, I bet there's a stadium, if you live in a major city in the U.S. with a major sports team, there is a stadium that was funded by the public coffer. The taxpayers paid for that public stadium, and guess who makes the most money off it? The owners, who are usually billionaires. There's only 32 of them in most leagues, or less. And for the Detroit Red Wings, I was reading it's the guy who owns Little Caesars. There's none in Texas where I am. But he pays $1 a year to keep ownership of that stadium. For 90 years, he has ownership of that stadium, the Detroit Red Wings owner. And so that's just something I don't think people see, is how, at the top, they do realize competition is a sham, and they're not competing. They're leveraging public funding for their own good, and that gives them a huge leverage over anyone who is truly competing at a free market level with their own skill versus their own skill.